Biodiversity is a neologism that combines biology on the one hand and diversity, that is, diversity in and of living nature. The word was first coined by E.O. Wilson in 1986 in his report to the first American Forum on Biological Diversity, and since then it has gained wide currency among biologists, environmentalists, political leaders and concerned citizens. This also coincided with the expansion of interest in extinction towards the latter part of the 20th century.
ശ്രീ ഭഗവതി കയ്യാലെ വാരി വിധത്തൂതേ മുമ്പിൽ പിറന്ന് ആദ്യനി തൂവരി നെല്ല് ആതക പൂത്താടാളിയൽ വീത്തൂമെങ്ങ പുല്ലെന്ന് നല്ലൂര് ചെന്നല്ല ഞങ്ങളാ ചെമ്മം ചൊരിയൂതേ തവളക്കണ്ണൻ വിത്ത് കൂടി വിളയുന്ന കുട്ടനാടോൻ വിത്ത് ഊരിൽ വിളയുന്ന ഓർത്തടി എൻ വിത്ത് നീരിൽ വിളയുന്ന നേർക്കടമ വിത്ത്
Biodiversity is the glorious blessing of Earth's nature. It announced the presence of life. This diversity in life forms survived as a basic factor for human existence from the very beginning of the evolution of life. The food and economic security that man desires for his future are dependent on the generosity of biodiversity. This wonderful universe of life extends from the microscopic virus to the enormous mammals, from the tiny moss to the gigantic sequoia. These imponderables of life retain a variety in type, family, and ecosystem. India is the land of millions and millions of life forms that seek shelter in the endless fascinations of tropical ecosystems that are storehouses of biodiversity. This is one of the major biodiversity-rich countries. There are about 10 biogeographical zones in India that include the Himalayan forest, the Indian desert, the Indo-Gangetic plain, the eastern and western Ghats, the coasts, islands, the Deccan Plateau, and the northeast. As far as traditional communities are concerned, agricultural biodiversity that has various uses is as important as that of the pristine forests. It was food security that determined the future of human society. India was one of the first 8 centers to start agriculture. Indian people cultivate about 51 varieties of grains, 104 varieties of fruits and 55 varieties of vegetables and pulses. Cultivated areas form a vast landscape of eco-culture. Food crop strains were selected over generations. A wealth of cattle contributed biofertilizer, along with labor, to stabilize agricultural production. Traditional know-how made efficient irrigation possible. Local agricultural methods preserved the quality of paddy field soils. For the Indian farmer, agriculture is a culture. A philosophy of life that embraces the totality of nature is a constant undercurrent in their agricultural activity. They preserve for posterity their rich knowledge about seeds, yields and agricultural practices through folk songs, proverbs and other verbal means that form the knowledge basis of traditional know-how. After the harvest, fields became grazing grounds for cattle. An astonishing diversity is seen in domesticated animals and birds in India. 26 indigenous varieties of cattle, 20 varieties of goats, 40 varieties of sheep, 20 varieties of chicken, and 4 varieties of duck. The Indian farmer was an expert at creating new varieties of animals and birds by crossbreeding. They regularly generated new varieties with good traits of domesticated animals like cow, goat, pig and horse, and also fighter cocks and racing pigeons. These new breeds, derived through crossbreeding of indigenous varieties, were quite capable of satisfying the needs of the Indian farmer, who was not avaricious. But the highly acclaimed Green Revolution led to a sharp decline in the genetic wealth that the Indian people had preserved so carefully. It severed the roots of existence of the Indian farmer, who had stood firmly on self-sufficiency and created a severe social liability. When the White Revolution, that aimed primarily at the production of milk, created crossbreeds, what was lost was the genetic purity of local Indian cattle. During the publicity campaigns for the Indo-Swiss project, a large number of local studs were castrated. As their lives' role was taken over by artificial insemination techniques, several indigenous varieties faced extinction. The Vechur cow is one such example. Different communities that have different cultures and lifestyles, differences in language, dress, beliefs, art, music, social structure, farming methods, crop, food, and so on. Cultural diversity among population is but part of biodiversity. It was this cultural diversity that helped people to face and overcome the challenges of different surroundings. Some communities lived in harmony with nature, utilizing its resources and not destroying its biodiversity. Nature provided them their sustenance, food, clothing, shelter, and raw materials for their work. Humans started agriculture in the Neolithic age. Even today, a human community depends for their survival on about 50 plants and about 10 animals that our ancestors tamed 10,000 years ago. It is believed that 1/3 of the entire plant diversity is edible, that only a small part of this vast food resource, which could relieve the hunger of the entire world population, is known to modern society. The food security of today's world is dependent on just about 15 varieties of plants. Village folk continue to protect the diversity of food grains by wrapping in hay or concealing in bamboo sticks and churaka husks. These rural folk who refuse to consume the paddy kept apart as seed, even in the midst of severe poverty, are the real protectors of biodiversity. Our food production was sustained through critical periods of disease and natural calamities by wild species of food crops. When Asia's paddy fields were gripped by the devastating grassy stunt virus, the International Rice Research Institute of Philippines created the crossbred variety IR36 from the wild paddy species Orisa nivara after screening 6,273 varieties of paddy. It was this globally popular high-yielding variety of paddy that played an important role in the Green Revolution. Orisa cortata, the wild paddy species from the Sundarbans. Orisa myriana, from the Agastya Vanam. Orisa perennis, that grows as a weed in paddy fields. Almost 50,000 endemic varieties that persist even in the machine tracks of the Green Revolution. There still exist myriad varieties of paddy that could potentially donate their germ plasm to new varieties to be bred in the future.
ഞങ്ങൾ ഉലം വാകാ നൂറ്റന്നതുണ്ടല്ലോ നിങ്ങൾ ഉലം വാകാ നാളല്ലതും ഉള്ളൂ.
Ecosystems diversity forms the pillars that support biodiversity. What wildlife sanctuaries, national parks and global heritage centers do is to preserve biodiversity within the diversity of ecosystems. The Western Ghat forests that stretch over 1,600 kilometers from Tapti in Gujarat to Kanyakumari are storehouses of biodiversity. They are the source of invaluable genetic material, and forests of the Western Ghats are the birthplace of several food crops like cardamom, nutmeg, pepper, ginger, turmeric, jackfruit, mango, and so on. Even now, there exist many wild relatives of these species in the Western Ghats. The Neela Kurangi, Strobilanthes kunthianus, that flowers only once in 12 years, and several others of the Strobilanthes group. The very rare orchid Ipsia malabarica, that is on the verge of extinction, and several other orchid species. More than 60 species of balsam are to be found here. Of the 4,000-odd species of flowering plants in the Western Ghats, 51 genus and 1,600 species are endemic to this region. This high level of endemism makes the Western Ghats region one of the hotspots of biodiversity in the world. The diversity of animal species is also fascinating in this ancient home of life forms that survived continental drift and climatic changes. Many mammals like the Nilgiri tar, the line-tailed macaque, and others are endemic to the Western Ghats.